Today we're going to be taking a look at the Supreme Court. And the power of the Supreme Court is that they are the interpreters of the Constitution. So that's why we want to take a close look at them in Chapter 4, because if we're going to look at the Constitution, we've got to look at those who are interpreting it to understand how they're applying the Constitution to the rules and laws we have today. As interpreters, the Supreme Court, they take a look at all laws and all presidential orders, and they ensure that those must follow the Constitution. So if the president or Congress passes a law or gives an executive order that is unconstitutional and the Supreme Court rules that way, then those orders and laws are struck down and are not enforceable. They in fact become illegal, and so they cannot be followed by anyone in the government. So the Supreme Court has a lot of power. They cannot or should not make laws. They should only interpret the ones that are made as acceptable under the Constitution or unconstitutional and should be struck down. So that's the Supreme Court. They are the referees. They're supposed to blow the whistle and say, that's wrong, that's okay, And so that's their goal and function and how they were designed. There are 9 justices on the Supreme Court, and they are appointed for life. So remember, in our guidelines to the Constitution, we saw how the judiciary was supposed to be independent, and what they mean by independent is independent of the political process. So to keep people away from having to run for re-election and constantly being responsible to the people for like a popular contest, they're appointed for life, and they're supposed to be above the idea of politics. They're only supposed to be referees that enforce the law. The president appoints them, and the Senate confirms them. So the president will point to someone and say, I want you on the Supreme Court if there's a vacancy. If it goes down to 8, there's a vacancy, and then I'm going to appoint someone. So that person gets appointed by the president. They then have to go before the Senate, and the senators will grill them usually for like a week, and then after the week, the senators will say, yeah, we want this person on the Supreme Court, or no, we don't want this person. President, go back and pick someone else. All right? So how do they have vacancies on the Supreme Court? Really, half the time they die, and the other half of the time they get so old that they don't wish to do the work anymore, and they step down from the court. So those are the really only ways that we can remove Supreme Court justices from the court. There is a way to impeach them, however, no Supreme Court justice has ever been impeached. So, they step down willingly or they die is usually the method that causes a vacancy. So you need to keep this in mind, the president and the Senate, because this is very much a part of the political process. We're going to tie all these things together here when we get to the end. There are 2 schools of thought for Supreme Court justices, because there are those who follow the law strictly and those who follow the law loosely. We call them loose and strict constructionists. So how they believe that the Constitution is constructed can be viewed in those 2 different ways. A strict constructionist is someone who believes that the Constitution says what it says, no more, no less. It is strict in how it is interpreted. So if this is what it says, this is what we do. We don't add to it. We don't change it to how we feel. We do what it says no matter what. So a strict constructionist believes that you can change the law, but you have to amend the Constitution to change it. You cannot just reinterpret it. So they're the kind of referee that says we follow the rules exactly as they're written, and we don't deviate from that at all. All right? A loose constructionist believes that the law is there as a guide, but not a strict rule, which I know seems a little strange because it's the law. But what you get with loose constructionists is they believe that things should bend with the times. If new ideas come up, if new popular thoughts come up, then the law is very slow to adjust. It might take 20 or 30 years for most of these things to turn over and change and be amended. And can't we just have what we want now? Let's just change it now. And that's why we want it to be loosely constructed, because whatever is the popular belief now, that can become the law. And so if we see an injustice, why wait 30 years for it to change? Change it right now. And so that is a loose constructionist. Okay, The problem with a strict constructionist is they don't bend with things, and so they might perpetuate an injustice for a long time. That's the problem with them. The good part about a strict constructionist is they follow the law as it is. And if you remember our guidelines to the Constitution, one of them was rule of law. So in order to have rule of law where everyone is equal under the law, you kind of have to be a strict constructionist, because everyone is then following the law the same all the time, and it's applied equally all the time. Okay? If you're a loose constructionist, the benefit they have is they can fix things that society sees as a problem immediately, and make that happen. The problem that they have is that they can be subject to the whims and wills of people, and so what some people say is an injustice, other people might say is fine, and then it becomes just a power contest about your feelings. Like, I just feel like I want it to be this way, so it is that way. And then you get a Supreme Court that becomes more like a president. They're simply issuing orders as opposed to ruling on the laws and being a referee. They've now become a player, and they say, well, the law ought to say this. And you say, but Congress writes the laws, you can't write them. And they say, well, they should write the law this way, so I'm just going to rule this way. And then you've got judges that have become legislators like the Congress or executives like the president, and they're not actually fulfilling their role. They're on the playing field playing as opposed to refereeing. Okay, so those are the different things here. And the reason you get these two belief systems is it goes back to chapter 1, where I asked you the question, do you believe the nature of mankind is basically good or basically evil? If you believe that people are basically evil, you will have a strict constructionist view, because the law says what it says and you have to follow it no matter what. Because if you get into what people want, if they're basically evil, you're going to get evilly implied laws, and it's really not what you want. And so a strict constructionist believes that people are basically evil, and therefore the law is there to keep that evil in check. A loose constructionist believes that people are basically good. And so how could we not come up with good laws? Why spend time waiting for the law to change and evolve, Congress to pass it, the president to sign it? Let's just make it happen right now, because we're all basically good. And so that's a loose constructionist. In our terms right now in America, we call these folks conservatives, and we call these progressives. These folks here are conservative because they want things to stay the same. They are strict about the Constitution is what it is, it says what it says, and that's it. I want to conserve those traditions and not change them. Whereas a progressive says there are problems in our society. Remember, for these folks that believe people are basically good, problems come from outside of the individual. And so it's not the individual's fault that they're committing crimes, it's that the organization we have is bad. If we can change our organizational structures, people will just become, better behaved. Things will work better. And so let's make that happen right now. And they want to progress to their utopia that they dream of. Somewhere out there is that perfect world, and if we can just keep working towards it, we can get there. So why waste time changing the laws? Why not just reinterpret them as clearly they should be done, because people are basically good. We all generally agree, so let's just do it. So these are the two different types of groups that you're going to find out there. These are the 9 justices that we currently have. And you'll notice something. There are 4 in the strict constructionist, and there are 4 in the loose constructionist, and there's 1 that kind of sits in the middle. And how the Supreme Court is structured makes a huge difference, because these people are around for, like 30 years. And so wherever the balance of power is, that's how our country is going to lean in this branch of our government. So you'll notice, if we go back, it says that the president appoints and the Senate confirms. So what's happened right now is that we have a Republican president, and Donald Trump, I think, got elected because he made a deal with the people in America over here. He said, you may or may not like me, but I'm going to appoint strict constructionist justices if you vote for me for president. And so what a lot of the news tends to fail at communicating is things are a little more complex than they like Trump or you don't like Trump. There's a lot of people that may not even like the president when they vote for them, but they vote for him based on the justices that they're going to appoint. So it could very well be that a lot of people said, hey, Trump, I don't really care one way or the other, but if he's going to put in conservative justices, I'll vote for him. So a lot of people, I think, voted for Trump because he was a strict constructionist and said he would appoint people over here. So that's an interesting thought. Trump has, for this next election, this is 2020 in the fall, he has released a name list of 20 people that he says he will choose from to appoint as justices on the Supreme Court so that the American people can know ahead of time who he stands for and who he's going to pick. He's challenging Joe Biden to do the same, and currently Joe Biden has not put any list forward, presumably because he thinks he's ahead in the polls, and if he was to put a list out there, they might alienate some people. So why not just leave it open to interpretation and let everyone think good things about him? All right? If it gets a little tighter come October, I think he might be forced to, put out a list. It's certainly going to come up in the debates, and it's going to be a challenge. So usually presidents like to put the list out there so that the voters can see, who they're going to pick from and what the future of the Supreme Court might look like if they vote for him for president. All right? So it matters a lot because these people are appointed for life. That means if they're appointed in their 50s, which most are, they're going to be there till their 80s, possibly even 90s, and that opinion is going to be carried forward in generations through the courts. Now, our founding fathers designed it this way because they thought changing government quickly was a real problem, because that would result in, a lot of just popular ideas getting put in, popular people getting put in, and they really were afraid of that in a democracy. They wanted some things to put the brakes on, slow it down, and that's what the Supreme Court does. It follows the laws and it really slows down any change so that things progress over time slowly, incrementally, and you can see the results without, hot-headed entering into a change of laws, which is what often happens in Congress. Okay? So, a little history here. Some of these people have been appointed by, going back to Bill Clinton. George Bush Jr. has put in some of these. I think Thomas is the oldest, being nominated by George Bush Sr. back in 1992, I believe. So these justices can be on there for a long time. Recently, the court has become very polarized. Normally, they're sort of an apolitical, cohesive group that doesn't really talk about politics. But the court has really divided in the last 8 years or so, and has divided along these lines. And the reason for that is that in Congress, some dirty tricks have been pulled, and the president is always going to be a political, figure. So the president appoints. President Obama had just a few months to go in his term. He was going to be leaving because he could not run for president anymore when a vacancy occurred on the Supreme Court. He put forward some nominations, and the Senate, which was run by Republicans at that time, just said, we're just not going to take it. We'll just not talk about it. Sure, you've appointed someone. We're just not even going to hold a hearing. And they waited until the election, and surprise, Donald Trump won. And now the Senate said, hey, our thing, our gamble paid off. And now Trump, please appoint someone to this opening, and we're going to get a conservative as opposed to a liberal progressive. So Neil Gorsuch was nominated by Trump, and Trump had him confirmed by the Senate, and he was placed in there. Another vacancy occurred, and Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh, and the progressives saw this as the end of so many progressive things in legislation, because if Roberts supposedly was over here and you got Kavanaugh in, you'd have 5 justices to 4 justices, and pretty much the strict constructionists would win everything down the line. Specifically in things like abortion would probably go away. That was the fear the progressives had, and so they fought the Kavanaugh hearing tooth and nail. It was the most crazy circus I've ever seen for a hearing. I mean, they were pulling out high school yearbooks, you're not fit for Supreme Court because in high school yearbook you were a partier. There was a lady that came forward and said that she was assaulted by him in high school. It turned out to be pretty vague. Okay, and so that it looked like smear campaign. Was it true? Wasn't it true? back and forth it went. It was some pretty crazy stuff, to where some senators were tossing their chairs over, like Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, and screaming like, what are we doing? High school yearbooks, this is crazy. And so it was a down and dirty effort. So dirty trick by the Republicans to not actually consider Obama's appointments, dirty tricks by the Democratic senators again for Trump's appointments. It was a knuckle dragon fight. I mean, it was bad. And so Kavanaugh was eventually appointed, and that sort of set the stage for, this is what it's going to be like from now on. Every time there's an appointment to the Supreme Court, we're going to go through this kind of circus. It's going to be the absolute craziest thing. And the effect that had was, I think, Roberts, who was traditionally a conservative, the last 3 rulings has ruled with this group over here. So we have had a 5-4 in several rulings, but it has not been this way, it has been that way, which has left a lot of conservatives scratching their heads going, what is Roberts doing? And some political theorists think, this is totally conjecture, that the attacks on Kavanaugh were done so that it was a threat to any other Supreme Court justice, and if they have some problems, some skeletons in the closet, if that stuff was to come to light, we will embarrass you with it unless you vote the way we want. Okay, so there have been all kinds of dirty tricks before in the Supreme Court, and it's looking like that might be the case again. Ruth Bader Ginsburg has come out and publicly denounced Trump, which is unheard of. The Supreme Court is supposed to be independent. She is clearly violating that many times. And has said, I'm a political figure and I will not stand for Trump being president. I will rule against him at every opportunity I can. That is not an independent judiciary move. And she has had cancer several times. She's battled cancer. I think she's down to like 85 pounds in weight. She's super frail, barely functioning, and she said, I'm going to try and live long enough to see Trump not be president. So this next election coming up in the fall here is going to make or break the Supreme Court one way or the other, because if Trump's elected again, Ginsburg is going to step down because she just isn't going to be able to live much longer and function, and Trump's going to be able to appoint someone who's strict constructionist. Breyer has also said that he is going to step down because he is feeling too old, and so it could be, if Trump's elected again, he'll have the opportunity to appoint 4 Supreme Court justices, and most likely they will all be over here, and that will set the tone for strict constructionist interpretation for the next 30 years on the courts. If Joe Biden is elected president, he has said he will nominate progressive, loose constructionist judges, so it'll probably retain this sort of look right here if he's nominated as president. So those are the kind of things that the American voters need to think about, more than just, do you like this president, but also, how's it going to affect the Supreme Court? And as far as their rulings lately, courts can choose any which way they want to go. Rulings are always in a number like this. So there's 9 justices. If they rule on a case and it's 5-4, that's a very weak opinion. So these 5 will write an opinion. It's called the majority opinion. And these 4 will write a minority opinion. Those will be entered into record as reasons for why the law should be interpreted certain ways. And it becomes passed down through the generations of the court so that other members can refer back and say, that's a good argument for these reasons. We should bring it back. That's an argument that's bad for bad reasons. We should change this. So this is a very weak win right here. If something was 9-0, like ending segregation, 9-0, that's almost unheard of, and you're just never going to really change that opinion. So that becomes sort of locked in stone for quite a long time. It would take a lot to change such a thing like that. Lately, the rulings have been going 5-4. They're pretty much split like this, and the deciding vote is Roberts. Whichever side he sides with, that's what becomes the ruling. Okay? So, some interesting things there. We can hopefully talk about some of the more specific court cases in class, and I hope to see your questions then.